episode 487, part 2. Kevin Lyons shares what he learned in detective training that he uses to follow the healthcare dollar.
American healthcare entrepreneurs and executives you want to know. Talking. Relentlessly seeking value.
In part 1 of this episode, we explored the barriers to stopping the flywheel that is driving up healthcare costs for the public sector. In short, and you really should go back and listen to the first part of this episode, but if you didn't, these barriers are, number 1, profit defends profit. In other words, if you have legislatures in charge of the contracts that are being awarded to carriers and PBMs and point solutions and consultants, etc., which is how it works in many states, and if these aforementioned entities make a lot of money, now they have a lot of money to make campaign contributions to the legislatures in charge of their contracts and also lobby. You have a lot of money, you can buy a lot of influence, in short. The second barrier discussed in part 1 is when public entities like states or et cetera don't have unconflicted experts on their side of the table. That's a problem, as you and me, we know very well. You're listening to this show, so this is totally self-evident. There is just no way without hearing, for example, episodes with Vivian Ho or Dr. Eric Bricker, Jonathan Barron, Cora Opsahl, Mark Cuban. Just think about the kind of insight you gotta have if you are sitting on the other side of a table from a TPA or whoever who tells you something like, you cannot have your data because ... Or no, you can't put in that maternity or doula program because we have a contract and it's impossible and ... Or it's fine if we audit ourselves and do our own payment integrity program. We have a great branch of our own company who does this and it's totally not a conflict of interest, pinky swear. Imagine if you didn't have the information that you who listens to the show probably do. And it sort of comes at no surprise if you think about it in this light, the wildly escalating prices that some state and even federal plans have. And this is hard, complicated stuff, and it takes years to figure out. But think about this. The state of New Jersey, that is in 2026 going to spend $3.5 billion. There is no, among other things, medical director who works for the state. So there's just a lack of unconflicted experts with a for-real seat at the table. That is our number 2 barrier. And then the third barrier, it's kind of an offshoot of profit defends profit. What profit also does is influence the media. When the media's biggest advertisers are often the healthcare industry, how are legislatures and taxpayers and even public employees themselves, how are they going to get the real story? Okay, so that was part 1. In the conversation that follows with Kevin Lyons, he shares some of the skills that he learned in detective training to deduce what is going on with his healthcare dollars being spent by and on behalf of his union members, where those dollars are disappearing to, what he writes in that little detective notebook I'm imagining he still carries around to this very day. So with that, here is the advice portion of my conversation with Kevin Lyons. Kevin is a former police detective and current executive director, law enforcement, labor employee benefits at the New Jersey State PBA, Police Benevolent Association. My name is Stacey Richter. This podcast is sponsored by Aventria Health Group. Kevin Lyons, welcome to Relentless Health Value.
Hello, Stacey. It's really awesome to be here. I'm really excited about this. Thank you for asking me to come on.
Let's get to the advice. As a former detective, delving into this really opaque, complicated, there's 20 narratives going on, and I'm picturing you with your notepad. What do you write down? How do you approach this kind of quagmire? As a former detective, what's your advice?
So 2 of the best classes I took when I was a cop were statement analysis and facial recognition. So seeing little ticks in people's faces and really interesting stuff, right? That's like the TV stuff that everybody likes to see, you know? But statement analysis to me, if you're prepared and you ask the right questions, that gives everything away. What I've seen is that when we're getting a presentation from a TPA or a vendor, nobody in particular, you start asking the questions. Well, the bad guys leave holes in their statement, or they don't answer that question. They'll sidestep it. So what I've seen, especially from TPAs, is that they'll sidestep it, and then you ask it a different way. Then all of a sudden, you get the answer. It's proprietary at the end of the day. right? Oh, that's proprietary. We can't tell you. Well, there's only one reason you hide something. Now they'll say it's corporate trade secrets and all the other stuff. That's BS. The reason is they don't want to give you the answer. What that is, that's a flag, right? That's where you want to follow. So when you see that omission, that lie by omission or that avoidance, that's where you're going to go. But the important part to that, and let me say this again, is that be prepared when you go in. When you see that you're getting a presentation from so-and-so, whatever company ABC, then do your homework. If you just go in there and if you're just filling a seat, don't waste anybody's time, but just follow their path, try and win them over. And then, well, what about this?
You said statement analysis. And what you're looking for there, what I'm hearing is probably most often not what they're saying, but what they're not saying.
Yes, without question.
Yeah, so you're digging in there, you're asking the why 5 times. I've heard people say, right? Like you're really hammering, trying to circle the wagons around what the unknown is, to quote Norman Schwarzkopf, right? Because you don't know what the unknown is at the very beginning, but if you ask enough questions, you probably can start drilling in on what is being unsaid. And as you just said, probably what's going to happen at that point, if you start asking and poking the bear, they're going to say, oh, it's proprietary. And once they start saying that, though, now you at least have in your viewfinder what they're not telling you, and you are better equipped then to try to figure out where the money is. Like you just found a honeypot, and at least there's one that exists.
That's exactly it. Because if you go there, and it's like putting in an Oprah or a FOIA request, right? If you don't word it just right, they're going to say, oh, we don't have to answer that. You have to get everything worded right. But if they're not just answering you at the beginning, they're just not answering you at the beginning. In that case, with what we're talking about, yeah, the missing piece is X marks the spot, in my experience.
Hi, I'm Chris Deacon with Versan Consulting. If you're listening to Relentless Health Value, we already have something important in common. You care about fixing what's broken in healthcare. This isn't just a podcast I tune into. It's one that I revisit, reflect on, and highly recommend. Stacey's conversations don't stop at the mic. They spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and fuel the work so many of us are doing to fix healthcare. If you're here for real change, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the podcast, sign up for the newsletter, and let's keep the momentum going. Thanks for listening.
So you've got the statement analysis. You've got watching them, asking a lot of questions, following the money through those questions to figure out where the dollars are, where there might be indirect payments, where there might be. And even if you don't get the details on that, now that it exists. Like someone just pleaded the fifth, right?
Right. That's exactly what it is. I was going to say that same thing is that when I know the Fifth Amendment's a constitutional right not to testify against yourself. But if people aren't guilty, they don't plead the fifth. That's kind of the trigger I use. And people may not like hearing that from a former cop, but that's really one of the tools we have. Then it's my job to go find it after that. If you're not going to tell me what happened, then it's my job to go find it.
And that's the responsibility that you're taking upon yourself. And I think, again, it's probably a big differentiator between those in government or those at unions who are really courageous and persistent, relentless, if you will, enough to recognize or count as part of their responsibility and accountability to go chasing down those answers, which the lovely vendor who just took you out to lunch does not want you to find.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you have to keep pushing and going forward.
If I was going to just say, in sum, what are the lessons that you may want those who may also be in similar positions in government to hear?
I think you have to be fearless and speak truth to power. You have to keep pushing. They're going to try and push you off. They're going to distract you. They're going to try and look over here. There's no man behind the curtain, right? I think you have to educate your members by putting out as much information as you can. You have to continue to do that. And most importantly, you have to follow the money. And then you're ready when the moment comes. Never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what I'm hoping happens here in New Jersey. I hope it wakes the people up. I hope it wakes the elected officials up that, hey, we've been telling you this is coming. We've been warning you. Now the day of reckoning's here. Don't think you're just going to push the cost onto us when we told you, because you can't plead the fifth anymore, because I know I told you. So I think in those scenarios, we have to try and be ready to move forward.
Yeah, right. Like at a certain point, some teacher's assistant is going to get their paycheck and be like, oh, you owe us. Their salary is going to be a negative because their health benefits are higher than their salary. I mean, like, seriously, if you're talking about 37% rate increases and it's already $1,000 a month, this is not something that there's not an unlimited money pit that public employees sort of have here.
Yeah, there's that graph on LinkedIn that shows that KFF put out that says the average family's plan is $25,000 now. That's just my members' contribution next year. That's just their contribution. The towns still have to pay the other share. So it's just, when is enough enough?
Point being, the total cost to the state of a family plan is $67,000. So if the teachers and firefighters and police officers and everybody else pay $25,000 or so, the towns and state are still picking up $42K, if I just did the math right.
You know, when are you going to start listening and stop saying they don't understand? That's the constant answer we get from the other side. They don't understand. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I hope to hear me, we do understand.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if you're advocating for like, hey, this is how we can do this smarter. The answer isn't throwing money. It's just, you just start saying it and it just sounds as ridiculous as it is, right? Like, oh, the answer to our problem is to just throw more money at the people who want more money.
And we bring solutions. Members, they're going to get better care, but it's going to be a change in the way healthcare is delivered to them. And the people for the state, the people for management are telling us, oh, that's too disruptive. You can't do that. Your members aren't going to like it. That's my job. That's not your job.
Claire Brockbank from the 32BJ was on this pod and said very specifically, she said, that's her tell. You were talking about some of your tells. Her tell is if someone brings up the D word, the disruption word, like that's how people have been probably in some manual. How do you shut down anyone who's fighting the status quo? Just bust out the D word and then everybody goes and hides in a corner, right? Like that's a power word, the disruption word. And I think at this juncture, people have learned to deploy it if they want to shut people down.
It's just...
It's laughable, right? It's not funny, but it's laughable. Kevin Lyons, is there anything I neglected to ask you that you want to bring up at this time?
Well, what I would like to say is I am eternally grateful for the leaders like you in this space. You, Chris, Susan Hayes, Cynthia Fisher, Justin, Cora, the people that have taken me under their wings. It's benefited my members immensely. You know, the New Jersey State PBA represents 33,000 members. I'm proud to serve them. And I just really hope that they start getting into the weeds on this, because once they're incensed, there's no stopping us. But I'm just more grateful than anything else.
Well, I could not appreciate that more. And besides Susan Hayes and Cynthia Fisher, it was Chris Deacon, Justin Leader, and Cora Opsahl that you mentioned, who might go by first names only, like Cher or Madonna at this point, but just for the record. Kevin Lyons, thank you so much for being on Relentless Health Value today.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Tom Nash, editor and producer of the RHV podcast. You've probably heard me say this podcast is sponsored by Aventry Health Group. And that's true, but there's more to the story. Aventry is our day job, and the people that make this show happen are Aventry employees generously donating their time and talent, on top of everything else they do to get each episode out the door. So yes, Aventry underwrites the production, but in many ways, Relentless Health runs like an unofficial nonprofit, a very, very nonprofit. Aside from the occasional and deeply appreciated episode sponsor and our wonderful listeners who donate to the tip jar, this show is scrappy and self-funded. If you want to keep this podcast independent and laser focused on educating, informing, and driving real change in our healthcare system, we invite you to become a monthly sustaining member of Relentless Health Value. We have a few of you who have already taken it upon themselves to do this already, and we are deeply grateful. So if you find value in what we do each week, head over to relentlesshealthvalue.com/donate and donate to the tip jar. Maybe become a sustaining member. Or if you or your organization wants to sponsor an episode or two, we'd love to chat. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of the movement.